15 true scary stories that will keep you awake tonight. Have you ever wondered if the floorboard creak you just heard was truly the house settling, or something far more intentional? Do you believe that the shadows in the corner of your room are merely a trick of the light, or could they be a silhouette waiting for you to close your eyes? Is it possible that the person you glimpsed in the reflection of your window was never there at all, or have they been standing behind you the entire time? What if the security of your locked door is nothing more than a fragile illusion designed to give you a false sense of peace? Can you be absolutely certain that you are the only soul breathing in your home right now? Tonight, we dismantle the comfort of the known. You might think you understand the boundaries of your reality, but as we journey through these 15 accounts rooted in the dark soil of the American landscape, you will find that the line between safety and absolute dread is thinner than a single strand of hair. I promise you that by the time we reach the end of this vigil, you will not just be hearing stories. You will be experiencing a profound shift in how you perceive the silence of the night. We begin in the vast, stretching plains of the American Midwest, where the horizon is a flat line that swallows the sun and leaves behind a darkness so thick it feels like velvet against your skin. Imagine you are driving down a two-lane highway, the asphalt cracked and worn beneath your tires. The rhythm of the road is hypnotic, a low hum that vibrates through your seat and settles into your bones. To your left and right, the cornfields stand like a silent army, their dry husks whispering as the wind brushes past them. There is no moon tonight. The only light comes from your dim headlights cutting a narrow path through the oppressive gloom. You feel the temperature drop, a sharp chill that seeps through the glass of the window, making the air inside the cabin feel heavy and thin at the same time. This is where the first story takes root, in the isolation that only the heartland can provide. You see a figure standing on the shoulder of the road, hundreds of miles from the nearest town. They aren't waving for help. They aren't moving at all. They are simply there, a static glitch in the landscape, dressed in clothes that seem too heavy for the season. As you pass, your eyes meet theirs for a fraction of a second, and you realize with a jolt of pure adrenaline that their face is not a face at all, but a smooth, featureless surface reflecting the glare of your lights. This is the moment where the stability of your world cracks. You check your rearview mirror, expecting to see them receding into the distance, but the road behind you is empty. There is only the red glow of your taillights and the encroaching corn. This structural failure of logic, the presence of something that cannot exist, is the fundamental essence of terror. It is the realization that the rules of biology and physics are negotiable in the dark. In these rural stretches, survival depended on the community, on the light of the hearth, and on the clear visibility of the horizon. When that visibility is compromised, the human mind begins to fold under the pressure of the unseen. You feel the steering wheel grow slick under your palms as the sweat turns cold. Every shadow in the back seat now holds the weight of a physical body. Every sound from the engine sounds like a plea. This isn't just a story. It is a manifestation of the environmental dread that has permeated this land for centuries. It is the cost of taming a wilderness that never wanted to be found. As we move deeper into the night, the stories will only grow more intimate, moving from the open road into the very places you call home. You must be prepared for the revelation that nowhere is truly out of reach. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel. It is the only way to ensure you never miss the hidden truths that lie beneath the surface of our everyday world, and to join a community that gives you to look into the abyss when others turn away. As the heat of your car's engine fades into the memory of the open road, we transition into the skeletal remains of the American industrial heartland, the Rust Belt, where the skeleton of progress now rots under the weight of gray skies. Do you feel the texture of the air changing as you move through the outskirts of a once thriving city in Ohio? Can you smell the metallic tang of rusted iron and damp concrete that clings to the back of your throat like a layer of dust? Have you ever noticed how the silence in an abandoned factory isn't actually silent, but filled with the groans of settling beams and the rhythmic drip of water hitting a stagnant pool? What if the movement you saw in that upper-story window wasn't a curtain, fluttering in the wind, but the slow, deliberate shift of something leaning out to watch you? Is it possible for a building to retain the collective anxiety of thousands who lost their livelihoods within its walls? Here, the architecture of decay provides a different kind of sanctuary for the things that hide from the sun. You find yourself walking down a street where the houses are hunched like broken old men, their porches sagging into the overgrown weeds. The streetlights flicker with a dying orange pulse, casting long, jerky shadows that seem to detach themselves from the objects they belong to. You are stepping over shattered glass that crunches under your boots with a sound like breaking teeth, a sharp, violent noise that echoes far too loudly in the hollow street. You reach a massive structure, a former textile mill whose bricks are blackened by a century of soot. The entrance is a yawning maw of darkness, a void that seems to pull the heat directly out of your body. Inside, the temperature plummeted, leaving a frost on your breath that glows faintly in the dark. The walls are slick with a substance you cannot identify, something dark and viscous that moves with a slow, agonizing gravity. As you move deeper into the labyrinth of machinery, you realize that the layout makes no sense. Stairs lead to solid ceilings, and hallways narrow until you have to turn your shoulders just to pass through. This is the physical manifestation of a system that has collapsed, leaving behind a husk that no longer obeys the human need for order. You hear a sound, not a footstep, but a dry, scraping slide, like heavy sandpaper being dragged over stone. It is coming from the rafters above. You don't look up immediately, because your instinct is screaming that to acknowledge it is to invite it down. The contrast here is between the ironclad stability this place once represented and the absolute, fragile vulnerability you feel now. A single misstep on a rotted floorboard could drop you into a basement flooded with oily water, far from the reach of any help. This environment teaches us that the structures we build to protect our civilization are merely temporary masks over a chaotic, indifferent reality. When the humans leave, the darkness doesn't just fill the space. It claims it, infusing the very mortar with a predatory patience. You realize that the shadow following you isn't a ghost, but a lingering echo of every fear ever felt in this dying place. In the depths of this urban ruin, the realization hits you that the greatest horror isn't being alone. It is the certainty that you are not. I want you to stop for a moment and look at the screen, and I want you to feel the weight of this truth. The darkness remembers what the light tries to forget. This sentence is a mirror to your own soul, a reminder that some things are never truly gone. Leave a comment with that exact phrase right now, because those who have felt the breath of the forgotten on their necks know that staying silent is no longer an option. This is how we acknowledge the unseen presence that lingers in the corners of our vision. As you stand there, trapped between the crumbling walls and the encroaching night, the sound in the rafters stops. The silence that follows is even worse, for it means that whatever was up there has found its way down. You turn your flashlight toward the sound, and for a split second the beam catches something tall, pale and impossibly thin, standing perfectly still behind a rusted boiler. It has too many joints, and its skin looks like wet paper stretched over bone. It doesn't scream, it simply exhales, a sound like a punctured lung, and begins to unfold. This is the moment where the concrete turns into a nightmare, where the history of a nation's labor becomes the backdrop for a visceral, bone-chilling pursuit through a graveyard of industry. From the rusted iron of the decaying cities, we ascend into the ancient, undulating peaks of the Appalachian Mountains, a place where the earth itself feels heavy with the secrets of 1,000 generations. Have you ever stood in a forest so dense that the sunlight struggles to reach the mossy floor, creating a perpetual twilight, even at noon? Do you feel the shift in the air, a thickness that smells of damp earth, rotting leaves, and something sharply acidic, like old blood? Can you hear the way the wind whistles through the gaps in the limestone cliffs, sounding less like a breeze and more like a chorus of distant mourning voices? What would you do if the birds suddenly stopped singing, leaving? A silence so absolute it made your ears ring with the pressure of it. Could you trust your own senses if you heard your mother's voice calling your name from the dark heart of the woods, knowing she is hundreds of miles away? Here, the terrain is a deceptive tapestry of steep ridges and lightless hollows, a vertical labyrinth where the geography is designed to disorient and consume the unwary. You are hiking a trail that has existed for centuries, the dirt packed hard by the passage of time and the feet of those who came before. The trees are gnarled and twisted, their branches interlocking like the fingers of a skeletal hand, blocking out the sky until you are encased in a tunnel of wood and shadow. The temperature here is erratic. A pocket of warm, stagnant air is suddenly replaced by a localized frost that makes your skin crawl and your hair stand on end. You notice that the trees are no longer swaying, even though you can feel the wind hitting your face. Everything in this environment is watching. You find a small, abandoned cabin made of hand-hewn logs, its roof caved in, and its windows like empty eye sockets. This is not a ruin of industry, but a ruin of survival. Inside, you see a single rocking chair in the center of the room, moving slightly back and forth with a rhythmic, agonizing creak. There is no wind inside these walls. The floor is covered in a layer of fine white ash, and you realize with a jolt that there are bare footprints leading from the fireplace to the chair, but no tracks leading back. The structural stability of the mountain life depended on knowing the boundary between the porch and the wild, but in this place, those boundaries have dissolved. You feel a sensation of being tracked, a prickling at the base of your skull that intensifies with every step you take away from the cabin. The contrast between the safety of the path and the predatory nature of the thicket becomes a physical weight. You realize that in these mountains, the food chain is not what it seems. There are things here that have survived since before the first maps were drawn, entities that mimic the sounds of the world to lure the curious into the deep ravines. Every snap of a twig is a heartbeat. Every rustle of the brush is a lung taking in air. You are a guest in a cathedral of predators, and the mountain is preparing to close its doors. The history of this land is written in disappearances and whispered legends, a reminder that some places are not meant to be inhabited. As the shadows stretch and the mist begins to roll down from the peaks like a slow-moving tidal wave, you understand that your presence here is a provocation. The mountain doesn't want your stories, it wants your silence. If you can feel the chill of the Appalachian mist through this screen, click the like button right now to signal that you are still here, still breathing, and still holding on to the light before the forest swallows the path entirely. This simple gesture is your anchor to the world of the living as we descend into even darker territories where the earth itself opens up to reveal what lies beneath. Beneath the roots of the ancient trees and the cracked foundations of the dying cities lies a world that was never meant for the eyes of the living. Have you ever considered what happens to the spaces directly under your feet when the lights go out? Do you feel the subtle vibration of the earth, a low-frequency thrum that suggests something massive is breathing deep within the soil? Can you imagine the sensation of air that hasn't moved in a century, tasting of sulfur and the cold mineral dampness of a tomb? What if the map of your city is only a surface-level lie, hiding a secondary, jagged geography of tunnels that stretch for miles in every direction? Is it possible that the scratching you hear behind your basement wall isn't a rodent, but the frantic movements of something trying to find its way back to the surface? We are descending now into the subterranean veins of the American landscape, into the utility tunnels and forgotten subway spurs that honeycombed the earth long before we were born. The transition is physical. The air becomes a pressurized weight against your ears, and the smell of ozone and wet limestone grows intoxicatingly thick. You are climbing down a rusted iron ladder, each rung slick with a black oily grime that stains your palms. The light from above is a dwindling square of gray, eventually replaced by the oppressive, absolute black of the deep. Here the temperature is a constant, unnerving chill that never fluctuates, a thermal vacuum that draws the heat from your skin like a parasite. You reach the floor, and your boots splash into an inch of stagnant water, the sound echoing down the tunnel for what feels like miles. This is the functional underbelly of civilization, a place of pipes, wires, and concrete, yet it feels entirely alien. The structures here are designed for utility, not for human comfort, and as you walk, the walls seem to lean inward, narrowing the space until the darkness is a physical presence brushing against your shoulders. You see markings on the walls, not graffiti, but deep rhythmic gouges in the concrete, as if something with claws of diamond was trying to dig its way through to the other side. The contrast here is between the organized grid of the world above and the chaotic, lightless void below. In the world above you have landmarks. Here every direction looks like a shortcut to a dead-end. You hear a sound that makes your heart stop, a high-pitched metallic screech, followed by the sound of something heavy dragging itself through the water behind you. It isn't the sound of machinery, it is the sound of something biological, something that has adapted to the dark by losing its eyes and sharpening its hearing. The fragility of your situation becomes a suffocating reality. If your light fails, you are no longer a person, but a blind animal in a cage with a predator that has known these tunnels for an eternity. The subterranean world is a reminder that our cities are built on a foundation of emptiness, and that we are never more than a few feet away from a darkness that cannot be tamed. This is the hidden cost of our progress. We have created a sanctuary for the things that cannot survive in the light. Share this video right now with someone who thinks they are safe in their own home, because the truth of what lies beneath is a burden that shouldn't be carried alone. As you scramble back toward the ladder, the dragging sound quickens, turning into a wet, frantic scuttle that vibrates through the very water at your feet. You realize that the ladder wasn't just an exit, it was a boundary that you should never have crossed. The dampness of the underground gives way to a different kind of isolation, one found in the heart of the American highway system and the liminal spaces of the roadside motel. Have you ever checked into a room where the air feels like it has been trapped since the late 70s, thick with the scent of stale tobacco and cheap floral disinfectant? Do you notice how the light from the buzzing neon sign outside bleeds through the gap in the heavy curtains, painting the stained carpet in shades of sickly green and violent red? Can you feel the texture of the polyester bedspread, a scratchy, synthetic fabric that seems to vibrate with the residual energy of the thousands of strangers who slept there before you? What if the muffled television static coming from the room next door isn't a broadcast at all, but a disguised frequency designed to keep you from hearing the wet, rhythmic thumping against the shared wall? Is it possible that the mirror on the wall isn't reflecting your room, but is a window into an identical space where something is mimicking your every move with a 3-second delay? We are now entering the realm of the transient, the places where people are meant to be seen but never truly known. This is the architecture of the temporary, a sprawling network of identical corridors and parking lots that stretch from the coast of Maine to the deserts of Nevada. You are standing in a long, narrow hallway where the wallpaper is peeling in long, jaundiced strips, revealing a dark mold underneath that looks like a map of a city that shouldn't exist. The floor is slightly uneven, a subtle structural flaw that makes you feel as though the building is tilting toward a central, unseen point of gravity. The stability of the modern traveler depends on the predictability of these spaces, the comfort of knowing exactly where the bathroom is and how the lock works. But tonight the lock feels flimsy, a thin piece of metal standing between you and a vast, indifferent exterior. You hear the sound of the ice machine down the hall, a sudden, violent crash of cubes followed by a mechanical whine that sounds like a human scream pitched an octave too high. You look out the peephole, but the hallway is empty. Only the flickering fluorescent light overhead creates a strobe effect that makes the shadows seem to jump forward in increments. The contrast here is between the domestic promise of a bed and the terrifying reality of being a nameless occupant in a space that doesn't care if you leave. These motels are built on the edges of society, serving as transition points for those moving from one life to another. But some transitions are never completed. You begin to realize that the structural layout of the motel is a loop, a geometric trap that feeds on the exhaustion of the weary. Every door looks the same. Every number is a variation of the last, and the exit sign seems to move further away the faster you walk toward it. This is a psychological erosion, a breaking down of the self within a labyrinth of beige walls and low ceilings. The meaning here is found in our desperate need for sanctuary and how easily that sanctuary can be inverted into a prison. We trust these establishments because they represent the order of the law and the commerce of the road. But in the middle of the night, when the manager is asleep and the highway is empty, the motel becomes a sovereign territory of the strange. You feel a cold draft coming from the air conditioning vent, but the machine is turned off. The smell of the desert, dry, dusty, and ancient, begins to fill the room, even though the window is sealed shut. You are not just a guest in room 214. You are an intruder in a space that has decided to stop intending ding. It is made for humans. As you sit on the edge of the bed, The springs creak under a weight that isn't your own, and the television static suddenly clears to reveal a live feed of your own room, taken from a camera angle you cannot find. The figure on the screen is sitting right next to you. But when you turn your head, the space is empty, yet the mattress remains depressed by an invisible hand. As the flickering neon of the roadside motel fades into your rear-view mirror, the landscape shifts into the mist-shrouded monoliths of the Pacific Northwest. Have you ever stood on a jagged coastline where the grey water of the Pacific meets a forest so ancient it feels like a sentient wall of wood? Do you feel the sudden, heavy moisture in the air, a dampness that doesn't just sit on your skin but seems to soak into your very marrow? Can you hear the rhythmic, guttural boom of the tide crashing into sea caves, a sound so deep it vibrates in your chest like a warning drum? What would you do if the thick, white fog rolling off the waves began to take shape, forming silhouettes that move with a fluid, predatory grace just beyond the reach of your vision? Is it possible that the salt spray on your lips tastes less like the sea and more like the metallic tang of something that hasn't seen the sun in 1,000 years? We are now moving through the coastal fog, a natural veil that strips away the structural certainty of the land. Here the world is reduced to textures: the slick, cold surface of tide-smoothed stones, the rough, rotting bark of fallen cedars, and the freezing spray that turns your breath into a ghost. In this environment, the stability of civilization is a joke, played against the backdrop of an indifferent ocean. You find yourself walking along a narrow cliffside path where the earth is soft and treacherous, prone to sliding into the abyss with the slightest pressure. The trees here don't grow straight. They are twisted by the constant wind into agonizing shapes, their limbs reaching out like desperate drowning victims. You notice a lighthouse in the distance, its beam a weak yellow pulse that struggles to pierce the gloom. But as you watch, the light doesn't rotate. It blinks in a frantic, uneven rhythm, as if someone inside is trying to communicate a panic they cannot speak. The structural purpose of a lighthouse is to provide safety, to mark the boundary between the solid and the fluid. But tonight, the light feels like a lure. You hear a sound rising from the surf, not the cry of a seagull, but a long, modulated moan that sounds like a ship's horn, distorted by a wet, biological throat. The contrast here is between the perceived safety of the shoreline and the terrifying reality of the depths that border it. This coast has claimed thousands of souls, and the fog is the medium through which the ocean explores the land. You realize that the shapes in the mist aren't moving away from you. They are circling, closing the distance with every breath you take. The air grows colder, a localized freeze that turns the mist into stinging needles of ice. This is the sensory reality of the maritime haunt, a place where the history of shipwrecks and forgotten expeditions manifests as a physical weight. The meaning of this place is found in the fragility of our borders. We think we have conquered the land, but the sea is a patient creditor. As you reach for the railing of a wooden overlook, your hand closes not on cold metal, but on something soft, barnacle-encrusted, and pulsing with a slow, rhythmic heat. You don't look down, because the sound of wet footsteps is now echoing from the path behind you, and the fog has finally closed the circle. Every drop of moisture on your jacket is a microscopic eye, watching your pulse quicken as the ocean begins to claim what the land can no longer protect. From the suffocating moisture of the coast, we are thrust into the opposite extreme, the searing, hollow silence of the American Southwest. Have you ever stood in the middle of the Mojave Desert at twilight, when the sky turns the color of a fresh bruise and the horizon stretches so far it makes your head swim with vertigo? Do you feel the sudden, dry heat radiating from the cracked earth, a thermal ghost of the sun that has already vanished? Can you hear the sound of the wind moving through the spines of the saguaro cacti, a thin, whistling hiss that sounds like 1,000 snakes breathing in unison? What if the flickering lights you see on the distant purple ridge aren't a town or a campfire, but a coordinated signal from something that doesn't use fire at all? Is it possible for a landscape to be so empty that it creates its own inhabitants out of the heat waves and the sheer desperation of your own mind? We are now navigating the desert mirage, a structural vacuum where the geography is a shifting golden trap of sand and jagged rock. Here the environment is defined by scarcity. Every drop of water is a miracle, and a very shadow is a sanctuary. You are driving down a road that hasn't seen a paving crew in 40 years, the white lines bleached into invisibility by the relentless sun. The stability of your journey depends on your mechanical horse, the hum of the engine being the only thing separating you from a prehistoric silence. You notice a cluster of buildings ahead, a ghost town that isn't on any map, its timber bleached white like sun-dried bone. This is the concrete reality of a failed dream, a place where the thirst won and the people simply evaporated into the dust. As you step out of the car, the silence hits you like a physical blow, a pressure that rings in your ears until you can hear your own heart thumping against your ribs. You find an old general store, its door hanging by a single rusted hinge that doesn't creak, but sighs as it swings in the hot breeze. Inside, the shelves are stocked with tins that have no labels, their metal surfaces polished to a mirror shine by the blowing sand. The contrast here is between the absolute abundance of space and the total lack of life. You feel a sensation of being miniaturized, a speck of organic matter in a mineral kingdom that has no use for your lungs. You hear a sound from the back of the store, the sound of a rotary phone dialing, the mechanical click-click-click of the numbers returning to zero. There are no phone lines for 60 miles. You realize that the desert doesn't just hold heat, it holds memories, and sometimes those memories get bored of being alone. The structural integrity of your reality begins to warp under the heat. You see a figure standing in the middle of the road, dressed in a black suit that doesn't reflect a single ray of light. They aren't sweating. They aren't breathing. They are simply a hole in the world, a silhouette carved out of the very air. This is the moment of structural collapse, where the desert reveals itself not as a wasteland, but as a laboratory for the impossible. The meaning of the desert is found in the stripping away of the ego. Out here you are nothing but a collection of fluids in a place that wants to be dry. As the sun dips below the horizon and the stars come out with a cold, terrifying clarity, you realize the figure on the road has moved 50 feet closer in the blink of an eye. You reach for your car door, but the handle is gone, replaced by a smooth, seamless surface of white bone. The desert has decided that you are no longer a traveler, but a permanent addition to its collection of curiosities. The vastness of the desert shrinks until it fits within the four walls of a suburban bedroom, transitioning into the most terrifying space of all, the domestic sanctuary. Have you ever woken up at 3 in the morning and felt a sudden, inexplicable certainty that the door you locked is now standing wide open? Do you notice how the shadows of the clothes hanging in your closet seem to have gained a three-dimensional depth that wasn't there when you turned off the light? Can you hear the slow, deliberate creak of the stairs, each one a measured weight that suggests a physical body is ascending toward your floor? What would you do if you reached for your phone on the nightstand and felt a hand, cold and dry as parchment, gently rest on top of yours? Is it possible that the house you've lived in for a decade has been hiding a secondary set of rooms, a hidden architecture behind the drywall where something has been raising a family of its own? We are now exploring the domestic breach, the structural failure of the home as a place of safety. Here the environment is intimate and familiar. The smell of laundry detergent, the soft glow of a digital clock, the familiar pattern of the ceiling fan. But tonight, the familiarity is a weapon used against you. The stability of your life is built on the assumption that your walls are solid and your locks are absolute. But terror is the realization that the intruder didn't come from the outside. They were already here. You lie perfectly still, your breath shallow and ragged, listening to the house settle in a way that sounds suspiciously like footsteps. You notice that the air in the room has grown unnaturally heavy, a density that makes it hard to swallow, as if the oxygen is being replaced by a thick, invisible mist. The contrast here is between the extreme safety of the bed and the total exposure of being asleep. You are a biological machine at its most vulnerable, and the house is no longer protecting you. It is containing you. You hear a sound from under the bed, a soft, wet clicking, like someone snapping their fingers in a pool of oil. You realize that the structural layout of your home has been compromised. The hallway seems longer than it should be, and the door to the bathroom is now on the wrong side of the wall. This is a spatial nightmare, a breakdown of the geometry of the everyday. The meaning of the home is found in the exclusion of the wild. But the domestic breach PR oves that the wild can be invited in by a single dark thought or a forgotten window. You feel the mattress dip behind you, a slow, heavy indentation that suggests someone has just climbed into bed. You don't turn around. You can't. The smell of old earth and ozone fills your nostrils, and you realize that the house isn't yours anymore. It belongs to the thing that has been waiting for you to notice it. Every tick of the clock is a countdown to a confrontation you cannot win. You realize that the most dangerous place in the world isn't the forest or the desert. It is the space behind your own eyelids. If you feel the urgency to check the locks on your doors after hearing this, click the share button immediately. Sometimes spreading the warning is the only way to keep the shadows at bay for one more night. As the figure behind you whispers your name in a voice that sounds exactly like your own, you understand that the breach is complete, and the sanctuary is now a cell. As the walls of your own bedroom begin to feel like the thin, translucent skin of a drum being beaten from the outside, we move from the physical breach into the harrowing geography of the human mind, the psychology of the shadow. Have you ever caught a glimpse of something moving in the corner of your eye, only for it to vanish the moment you turned your head to face it? Do you feel the sudden, icy prickle of the gauze, that evolutionary alarm bell that rings in the base of your brain when you are being hunted by something you cannot see? Can you hear the way your own pulse begins to mimic the rhythm of the house, a frantic double thump that betrays your attempt to stay calm? What if the reason you feel so uneasy in the dark isn't a primal fear of predators, but a subconscious recognition that your reality is flickering like a dying light bulb? Is it possible that the ghosts we fear are actually structural glitches in time, moments where the past and the present collide in a violent, silent spark? We are now navigating the mental labyrinth of the American psyche, a place where the vastness of the land has been internalized as a profound, ageless anxiety. Here the environment is cerebral, the smell of ozone, the taste of copper on your tongue, and the visual distortion of static that clings to the edges of your perception. In this state, the stability of your sanity is the only structure left standing, and it is under a constant rhythmic siege. You are sitting in a chair in a dimly lit room, watching the shadow of a tree branch dance against the wall. But as you watch, the shadow detaches itself from the branch and begins to walk independently across the plaster. The contrast here is between the objective world of matter and the subjective world of the nightmare. You realize that the brain is a biological filter designed to keep out the 90% of reality that is too terrifying for us to process. But tonight, the filter is clogged with the sludge of 1,000 true stories. You hear a sound, not from the hallway but from inside your own skull. A soft, wet peeling noise like a sticker being pulled off a brain. This is the structural collapse of the ego. The meaning of the shadow is found in our inability to truly know ourselves or the spaces we inhabit. We build skyscrapers and bridges to prove our dominance over the earth, but we cannot even control the images that haunt us when the sun goes down. You feel a sensation of falling upward, a vestibular betrayal that makes the floor feel like a vertical wall. You are no longer an observer. You are the observed. The shadow on the wall is now standing directly in front of you, a three-dimensional void that absorbs all the light in the room. It doesn't have a face, yet you can feel its intense predatory curiosity. This is the moment where the psychology of terror becomes a physical confrontation with the unknown. You realize that the 15 stories you've heard tonight weren't just accounts of external events. They were invitations to the darkness to find a way into your thoughts. Every fear you've ever suppressed is now a living, breathing entity standing in your living room, waiting for you to acknowledge its right to exist. We have reached the final watch of the night, the eternal vigil, where the concrete and the symbolic finally merge into a single, devastating truth. Have you ever noticed how the air just before dawn is the coldest, as if the world is holding its breath in fear that the sun might never return? Do you feel the immense weight of the American landscape pressing down on you, a continent of secrets that has seen civilizations rise and fall into the same dust we walk upon today? Can you hear the final, distant echo of all the voices we've encountered tonight, the traveler, the miner, the hiker, the dreamer, all joined in a silent prayer for your morning? What would you do if you realized that the end of this video isn't the end of the experience, but the beginning of a new way of seeing the dark. Is it possible that the true horror isn't what is hiding in the woods, but the fact that we are the only things in the universe that feel the need to hide at all? We have moved through the plains, the ruins, the mountains, and the deep places of the earth, and now we stand at the threshold of a final revelation. The structural integrity of our world is a beautiful, fragile lie that we tell ourselves every day so that we can function. But the truth is found in the gaps, in the silence between the heartbeats, and in the shadows that refuse to leave when the lights come on. The meaning of these stories is not to entertain, but to remind you of your own profound vulnerability. We are temporary occupants of an ancient, indifferent world that was here long before us, and will remain long after our bones have turned to white ash in the desert sun. The stability we crave is a shadow. The risk we fear is the only constant. As you prepare to return to your world, remember that the darkness hasn't left. It has simply settled into the corners of your mind, waiting for the next time you find yourself alone. You have journeyed through the architecture of dread, and you have survived, but you are not the same person who started this path. The night has changed you, sharpening your senses and thinning the veil between your world and the one that watches from the mist. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel, because the knowledge we share here is the only light that never goes out, a necessary shield against the shadows that try to silence the stories that need to be told. If you've watched this far, it's because you liked this case. Leave a comment saying, "I've watched this far so I can get to know you and know who really likes the stories here on the channel." Leave your like now to seal this pact of courage and share this documentary with those who still believe they are alone in the dark. Dawn is coming, but the sun only hides what the night reveals. Sleep well if you can, and remember, the cracks in the wall of your house are just the beginning of a story that hasn't finished being written yet. The silence is now yours, but the vigil is eternal.